Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our virtual Earth Day event. I'm Paulina Benner, the City of West Sacramento Environmental Services and Sustainability Manager. We're here today to provide you with updates on the city's climate action plan and to learn more about proper recycling in West Sacramento in our Ask an Expert segment. Thanks again for joining us today. Before we get started, I'm going to go over some important details about today's online event using Zoom. First off, only our presenters will have audio and visual capabilities. However, all of our audience members can interact during the event by using the Q&A function and by answering polling questions posed throughout the event. Please submit any and all questions that occur to you throughout the event by clicking the Q&A icon that is located on the toolbar that will be either on the bottom, top, or side of your screen. You type your question there and just click enter and it will be submitted to us. We will answer questions after the climate action plan presentation, and then again towards the end in our Ask an Expert segment. If you don't see that toolbar on one of those locations, top, bottom, or side of your screen, if you move and hover your mouse, the toolbar should appear. If you accidentally move out of the Zoom event to view something else on your screen, just click on the blue and white video icon that should be in the regular toolbar to get back into the webinar. For our first segment, which is the Climate Action Plan presentation, I'd like to invite and introduce David Tilley, City of West Sacramento Principal Planner and one of the lead project managers for our City Climate Action Plan update, who will introduce our presenter. Thanks, David, and please take it away.
All right. Thank you, Paulina. As Paulina mentioned, my name is David Tilley. I'm the Principal Planner in the city's Community Development Department. And along with Paulina and our consultant team, we are preparing the city's climate action plan update now, and this is a big part of our efforts here is making sure we're reaching out to the community on those efforts. The climate action plan, really in a nutshell, is the implementation plan for how the city can get to carbon neutrality by 2045. That includes city operations, but also community level operations. Our community, like most communities, is working on their climate action plans and trying to address the climate crisis, head on. So we are all efforts forward on climate. So carbon neutrality is sort of the new term of art in this particular space. And so at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Josh Lathan with the AECOM leading the consultant team to provide a more detailed input into the climate action plan.
Got my screens all set up. Okay, up to 10 minutes or so of questions at the end. And I also have
Looks like we may be having some technical difficulties. Please bear with us on that as we get set up for Josh's presentation.
share my screen.
There we go.
Okay. Can you hear me, Paulina?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. All right, great. How exciting. My presentation is going to touch on the overall CAP development process, what causes greenhouse gas emissions in the city, and what the city's greenhouse gas targets might look like. I'm also going to introduce some high-level greenhouse gas reduction strategies that we're starting to think about, some local climate champion stories that we're starting to collect. So with that, let's go that presentation today so that we can refine our engagement efforts in the coming phases. So from the list of options available, please tell us what West Sacramento neighborhood you live in. We're just going to take a few moments for folks to wrap up, and then I will read out the results when we see those. Take a couple more moments here and let some folks get their answers in on what West Sacramento neighborhood you live in. A quarter from the Northeast Village area. Got a bit of a spread in there. Thank you all for taking part in that. So now we're going to dig right in. Some of you may already know a lot about CAPs, and some might be learning about them for the first time today. So I want to start with a 30,000-foot overview of the major steps in the climate action planning process. In general, a CAP is a roadmap for how a city can reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to minimize further contributions to global climate change. And in some instances, like in West Sacramento, it will also identify potential climate hazards like extreme heat events or wildfires and create strategies for how the city can prepare and respond. We often talk about two approaches to tackling climate change. On one hand, we can mitigate or reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we emit, since those are the primary contributors to human-made climate change. And on the other hand, we can adapt to the likely impacts of climate change that are already in motion and can't be stopped immediately. Another good way to think about it is that the need for climate adaptation is the result of decisions made 1, 2, maybe 3 decades ago. And the decisions that we make today for mitigation will help those in the future. So responding to climate change is a lot like getting back in shape. The best time to start was months or years ago, but the next best time to take action is today. And this graphic really simplifies the CAP development process a bit, but I like it because it helps to draw a distinction between the planning phase, which we're in right now, and the doing phase, which comes next. Figure shows a 6-step process with those primary steps in bold text, and then places for community engagement and participation in blue italicized text. We're in the process of completing steps 1 through 3 right now. We are analyzing the community's greenhouse gases to understand where they come from in West Sacramento. And that helps us think about what kind of greenhouse gas reduction targets can we set, and what actions do we need to develop to achieve those targets. This part of the process benefits from stakeholder and community engagement input to make sure that the community's priorities are reflected in the targets that we set, in the actions that we develop, and in our understanding of what barriers and opportunities West Sacramento will face in plan implementation. At the end of step 3, we have a CAP that we can act on. Steps 4 through 6 can also happen simultaneously, and they tend to be a bit iterative. So we begin plan implementation in step 4. And this really relies on collective individual actions of residents and local businesses, as well as guiding leadership and support from the city. During plan implementation, we also need to be monitoring results in step 5 to ensure that the changes we want to see happening actually are. So in this case, are our greenhouse gas emissions decreasing like we expected? And if not, where are we falling short and why? That monitoring information is helpful to guide future plan updates in step 6. The plan is a living document, and it needs to constantly be refreshed or updated based on the results that we're seeing, changes in regulations, new technologies that we can't even predict right now, et cetera. And again, community input is critical in developing a successful plan. plan in steps 1 through 3. It continues to be important during the implementation of the reduced greenhouse gas emissions that come from activities in our community. And a good starting point is with the city's greenhouse gas inventory. An inventory tells us where our emissions come from, and it's organized into sectors or categories. The primary sectors that we've addressed in West Sacramento's inventory are transportation, which is the dark blue wedge here. This is our cars and buses and trucks and forklifts, things that are mobile sources of emissions in our community. Next is building energy, the light blue wedge. This is electricity and natural gas that we use in our homes and businesses and offices. It includes the things like using air conditioning during a heat wave, or washing and drying laundry, keeping food cold at the grocery store, lighting our buildings and streets. And then finally, we have waste, the seafoam green wedge here. That includes how we manage the trash that we throw away and how we treat the wastewater that we produce. This slide shows a little more granular detail. As you can see from the huge light blue wedge, on-road vehicles, our cars, is easily the largest source of emissions, which means it needs to be a priority focus for greenhouse gas reductions to achieve our targets. The second and third largest sources are commercial energy use, again shown in a dark blue wedge here, so energy in our businesses and offices, and residential energy shown in the lighter green wedge, and again, that's energy used in our homes. The other remaining subsectors make up about 12% of total community emissions and include things like off-road vehicles and equipment, waterborne solid waste and wastewater management, and institutional energy use in city buildings and facilities. So this kind of detail developing emissions forecasts so we can understand and think about how the community's emissions might change in the future. This is important to consider because when you compare it to the city's greenhouse gas targets, these forecasts tell us the total amount of greenhouse gas reductions that we need to achieve the targets. The work often includes a business as usual scenario that shows how emissions could grow if no further action is taken, and then an adjusted business as usual scenario that considers existing policies or regulations that we think are going to be implemented with a high degree of certainty. So I'm showing here West Sacramento's draft greenhouse gas forecasts. We're still noodling them around a little bit. But in the business as usual scenario on the left, if we take no further action and regulations are not implemented beyond their current levels, the city's emissions could grow by about 50% by 2045. These forecasts are based on a number of assumptions and growth indicators, but the most important ones are the city's expected population and employment growth as imagined in the city's general plan, and then changes in the amount of vehicle travel. And that is modeled by SACOG or the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. The adjusted business as usual scenario on the right would see emissions increase by only 5% by 2045. And that scenario reflects implementation of some really important and powerful statewide actions. And that's things like the state's vehicle efficiency regulations and requirements for utilities to provide lower emissions electricity in the future. There are a number of other regulations that can be reflected in this ABAU scenario. Sometimes we'll estimate their X like they say they will. It could lead to reductions of Y, which leads to the question, what are the city's greenhouse gas targets? What are we aiming for in this cap? West Sacramento set an ambitious goal to achieve net carbon neutrality by 2045, which means in our cap, we're aiming for 0 emissions in 2045. The cap will also have an interim target for 2030 that can be a stepping stone on the way to carbon neutrality. 2030 was selected because it lines up with the state's own adopted 2030 greenhouse gas target year, and because it serves as a good check-in point to see if we're trending in the right direction for that 2045 target. And if we're not, it gives us enough time to take action and course correct. So a question that we consider as we now begin to think about the specific CAP actions is, what should that 2030 target look like? How aggressive can we be over the next 9 years or so? Because we want a target that is ambitious, but also achievable. So we've developed a few target options that we think can help achieve the city's multiple goals for this CAP. And ultimately, that target probably falls somewhere within this fuzzy green range illustrated here. Picking that final 2030 target will be informed by community input, the results of CAP action modeling, and feedback to lead the way towards the 2045 carbon neutrality goal. So I've just talked to you a lot, and we're going to take a quick break here for another polling activity. This time, we want your thoughts on what you expect the city, that is the government of West Sacramento, to do to respond to climate change. So again, I'm going to give you a moment to read the options here, and you can pick your top two preferences from this list. Once we see results on the screen, I'll go ahead and read out what those top two top three preferences. So let's go ahead and hear what your top three favorite options are. Okay, it looks like the top is providing funding or other direct resources to support disadvantaged and low-income communities and extending light rail into West Sacramento. And then we have a three-way tie for third: leading by example in city operations, informing residents and businesses about how to reduce their emissions, and providing infrastructure like car chargers for electric vehicles. So that's great. Thank you all for providing those inputs there. We're almost done now, so I promise. I've now shown you where our emissions come from, how they might grow in the future, and what kind of targets we're considering for the plan. We're now moving into the phase of identifying the specific CAP actions that help us achieve the greenhouse gas target and provide additional community benefits. At this point, as of right now, we've simply outlined high-level strategic areas that we think we might want some CAP actions. These strategies are informed by the emissions inventory that I just reviewed to make sure that we're addressing the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions. The strategies include things like electrifying our buildings, so moving away from natural gas and then providing that electricity from carbon-free sources of energy, or reducing private vehicle trips through our planning and community design approaches, and then again, working to electrify the vehicles used for those remaining vehicle trips. If we're aiming for carbon neutrality, all options need to be on the table, and we need to be bold in our actions. On the adaptation side, strategies might include things like developing or expanding green infrastructure that helps us address the urban heat island effect. And this would respond to future climate projections for increased temperatures and more incidents of extreme heat. The images shown here, the ideas shown here, are not final at all. We're just starting this process now, and we wanted to share our initial thoughts and get some feedback. And part of the CAP workshop that's coming up this Tuesday will be to have small group discussions around these strategy areas to see what else we're missing, which ones are less appealing, and what potential barriers might we face in pursuing them. Another unique component to West Sacramento's CAP is going to be the inclusion of short stories spread throughout the plan that tell about our local climate champions. These are residents, local businesses, city departments, and other agencies that are already taking actions that result in emissions or climate risk reduction. And we wanted to celebrate what's already happening here and highlight those ideas that others might want to implement for themselves. And there's a lot of really cool things that are already happening, like food diversion programs at grocery stores to feed our community and reduce landfill waste. Installation of renewable energy systems and data tracking to help guide personal behavior for at-home energy use. Innovative material development approaches, trying to remove oil from the equation of making plastics. And then finally, electrification of school buses within the Washington Unified School District. So if anyone has ideas for other climate champions that you know about that we should talk to, you can email suggestions to the CAP team at the email shown here, and I'm also going to list that on my final slide. Oops, sorry, everyone. I also wanted to make a quick pitch here for our upcoming virtual community workshop on April 20th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. You can register on the city's CAP website at the link at the bottom of this slide. That workshop is going to be co-hosted with the Delta Stewardship Council, where they will present results of their Delta vulnerability assessment and talk about what those findings mean for West Sacramento. I'm going to give an eerily similar presentation to this one before we go into small breakout groups to discuss potential CAP strategies that I mentioned earlier. So you can also find a link to a climate survey on the city's CAP website now, and you can give us further thoughts there with the survey open until the 14th. And lastly, before we get to the Q&A, if you have specific questions about the CAP project, you can contact the city's co-managers, David and Paulina, with their contact info listed here. I've also included, again, the city CAP website where you can join the CAP email list, register for Tuesday's community workshop, and find the link to the climate survey. And I'm also showing, again, the CAP team's email address if you want to reach out with specific questions. So now I think we're going to take 10 minutes or so to answer some questions. David Tilley's going to rejoin us, and Paulina, I'm going to turn it back over to you to quarterback some responses. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Josh. Before we head into the Q&A section for the Climate Action Plan, I'd like to introduce Mayor Guerrero, who is on with us today, and give her an opportunity to say a few words to us.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us in taking a look at how we can improve our climate and address those issues through our Climate Action Plan. It's a priority and a commitment for all of us here in West Sacramento and our leadership to be able to address the challenges ahead of us so that we can ensure that our community is safe and free from the impact of climate change. We've done quite a few things in the city so far, which is the implementation of VIA, and we're looking at our mobility action plan and trying to draw down federal and state resources so that we can improve more ways of having mobility and getting out of our cars and going in our bicycles, on our bikes and trails, and also doing less movement in those areas which we have identified that is increasing our greenhouse gases here, which is our cars. And seeing the responses in extending light rail, that's something we're going to, put that on our plan as well. I think it's an area of interest for many of our residents to get out of their cars. It makes it just a lot easier just to get in and being able to use light rail immediately directly access to work. So in working with you today, we would like to ensure that we are taking all of your input and making it actionable in the future. Appreciate all the work that our city administration has done, David Tilley and Josh and Paul. Paulina, thank you very much for all your work, and look forward to working with you. This is just the beginning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guerrero. I appreciate your comments and support. Thank you so much. All right, so now is the time to start the Q&A section of the Climate Action Plan presentation. Also want to note that the website that Josh mentioned is available to our audience in the chat box. And again, that's citywofwestsacramento.org/climate. So if Josh and David will rejoin me, we'll answer some questions you may have. There was a question that was already posted and it was answered. Member asked what the current population of West Sacramento is and what the projected growth for 2030 and 2045 would be. And currently we're at about 54,000, and by 2030 we anticipate another 5,000 additional residents and approximately 85,000 population by 2045. At this point, that's the only question that we have posted. So if you think of things, please add your questions now in the Q&A. And again, just type in your question and hit submit and we'll answer that. But I do have another question for Josh and David as well. And what are the next steps at this point? I mean, Josh mentioned some upcoming workshops. What's the next steps in our climate action plan?
Well, I'll try to jump in here while Josh is deep in thought there. So
Sorry, Pauline,
we've done a lot of the technical work, and we have identified, a whole suite of potential mitigations. And so I think a lot of our next steps are going to be communicating some of those concepts, to our community, and to get some early feedback on things before because nothing is set in stone at all at this point. We really want to float some of those concepts out into our community and with our businesses, and try to get some initial feedback about those measures that people believe would be most effective and most practical for them to do in day-to-day life. This is a very fundamental aspect of this. We'll also need a complete environmental review on the CAP, which fortunately the CAP itself is essentially one big mitigation measure against negative impacts. But we're definitely getting into the meat of it now. We appreciate everyone being on the call this morning, and hopefully can attend on Tuesday night and then future workshops that will be scheduled.
Great, thanks, David. Another question about the inventory. Do those emissions include things like production of solar panels and other electronics that we as residents use?
Well, I think that's an excellent question for Josh, our technical expert.
Yeah, I'm clearly having connection issues. I'm sorry. Comcast is trying to prevent me from sharing these ideas, I guess. I'll do my best to answer that one. So the question was about if production or manufacturing of the goods that we consume is included in our inventory. And the short answer would be no, it is not in this type of inventory. There are guidelines or frameworks that describe how cities should think about and estimate emissions in their inventory. And there's a few different types of those guidance documents. But we followed the one that is most typical for cities to follow when they develop a climate action plan. An alternative type of inventory that would capture those types of emissions from iPhone production and solar panels is something called a consumption-based inventory that tries to represent a complete amount of emissions tied to the money that we spend to purchase goods and services. In that type of inventory, it would reflect the emissions from extracting raw materials, manufacturing an iPhone or a solar panel globally, transporting it to a consumer, and then disposing of it at the end of its life. There's actually a good online calculator that you can use if you're interested in learning about your own household carbon footprint, which uses a similar approach to what I just described for a consumption inventory. So you can Google coolcalifornia.arb or Cool California Calculator, and then play around with the household calculator that shows up.
Great, thank you very much, Josh. If there's any other questions about the climate action plan, we have another 2 minutes for the Q&A section. If you have a question you haven't had a chance to ask related to the climate action plan, please type it into the Q&A box now. I'll give a few seconds. And again, I'll just remind everyone one last time that the citywestsacramento.org/climate is the website to go to for more information. You can also sign up there for e-blasts about upcoming events and to get information about where we are in the planning process, so you can participate along the way.
Paulina, we do have 2 questions.
Yeah, I do see that question about, I see one question about, well, 2 questions, but the recreation. I thought the first one was mostly recycling. I apologize.
I was hoping you could maybe address the first one, and I'd be happy to address the second one.
Okay, yeah, I thought the recycling one I was going to do in the Q&A for recycling, but I'll do that now because I see that we do have a question about recreation. Yes, thank you, David. I apologize for that. So the question is if we could have more access to recycling of items like furniture and electronics every 6 months, especially for those who are living in apartments. So Waste Management does provide bulky waste collection for both single family residents and residents who live in multifamily complexes. For the multifamily complex bulky waste program, it depends on where you live. So for that question, it'd probably be best if I followed up with that person separately. It's a case-by-case basis, depending on how the property manager is setting up the recycling program. But there are also options for drop-off. You know, the landfill offers drop-off for a variety of things, and including electronics. But again, the waste management program would probably be the best bet, and we can follow up with that resident specifically on that option. And then the other question is if there would be more recreational areas in the city or surrounding, if we could go for trails and other activities. For more
The answer to that question, fortunately, is yes. I think the biggest example will be ultimately when we pave a trail on top of the new levee in Southport, which will be a whole new amenity from scratch, and that will have some good tie-in points to the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail. We've already opened up around the barge canal access in that area, just over the ship channel. Ultimately, we will have a pedestrian bridge that spans the ship channel, and pedestrian and bike bridge that will help, interconnect Southport even more to the rest of the city and vice versa on a bike and ped basis. And we have a very active transportation program in the city's departments that continually secures grants to do bicycle and pedestrian improvements. One of the biggest one will be the new pedestrian bridge over US 50. It's sort of an extension of the Sycamore Trail. So once that's in place, one could go from the north end of the city all the way down to the barge canal on a bike and ped basis. So there is a lot in the works, and we certainly encourage everyone to remain engaged on those activities and come out and support and enjoy them. Because they are great amenities in our community.
Great, thank you very much, David. We have one more question. What are we doing to improve the infrastructure of West Sacramento to make it more accessible for residents to walk?
Well, that is, very similar to the previous question about trying to make sure that we actually provide more biking and walking opportunities. We have complete streets policies in our general plan that will ensure that when new roads are built or when existing roads are in for sort of major upgrades, that will make sure it includes adequate space for walking, biking, rolling, etc. The city also works on safe routes to school programs to encourage walking for students to get to schools, especially now that they're starting to reopen. So there is a lot in the works on this front. It's not all going to happen overnight, but it is all in the works and is all happening as time permits and funding allows.
Great. All right, thank you very much, David and Josh. I appreciate your help with this, and thanks, Josh, for the presentation on our climate action planning efforts. Next up is going to be a short video that will provide you with some tips for recycling food scraps at home, and we'll show you how our organic waste is recycled and composted at Yolo County's composting facility.
Waste Management is dedicated to providing sustainable organic solutions for our customers and the communities we serve. We are proud to partner with you to make the collection of organics, including yard trimmings and food scraps, simple and effective at your home. Remember to only discard these items in your organics container: grass clippings, weeds, plant material, untreated wood, leaves, food scraps, eggshells, meat and bones, food soiled paper like napkins, coffee filters, and loose tea. Remember, keep sod, rocks, dirt, styrofoam, diapers, trash, and recyclable materials out of your cart. Only use paper or BPI certified compostable bags to dispose of your organics and green waste. When your cart is picked up, where does it go? Organics from West Sacramento are taken to the Yolo County Central Landfill to be composted. First, the material is ground into smaller pieces. Then, it is placed into a pit. Each pit can hold about 5,000 tons of organics and green waste. Once the pit has been filled, it is covered with a cement-like sealer and begins anaerobic, otherwise known as airless, digestion to break down the material. This process takes about 4 to 5 months. The methane gas created is collected via pipes to generate renewable electricity for the grid. After this phase is complete, air is pushed into the pile and the temperature is raised high enough to destroy pathogens and allows the material to break down even further. After a few weeks, the material is excavated from the pit, goes through a screen to remove any contaminants and larger woody pieces. Once the process is complete, the material is ready for sale. This high-quality Title 14 certified compost provides nutrients for our area's farms, orchards, and vineyards. So your food scraps are helping to grow new food.
All right, great. I hope everyone learned a little something about food scrap recycling from that video. Now we'd like to know how many of you are currently recycling food scraps in your organics cart by responding to the following polling questions. First one is, do you recycle food scraps in your organics cart? And second, do you have a kitchen pail for your food scraps in your home? So I'll give everyone a few minutes to answer and then we'll talk about the results. Just another minute or so. Please submit your answer when you have a chance. All right, well, this is good news. It looks like 75% of our participants are already recycling food scraps in your organics cart. So thank you very much for participating in our program. And about 50-50 on whether or not you have a kitchen pail in your home. So that's good information to have. If you don't have an organics cart or a kitchen pail, West Sacramento residents can call Waste Management at 866-844-1508, and that's on the screen right now. And that's where you'll call to request the free kitchen pail. There's a picture of it on the screen here in the upper left-hand corner, and then also our organics carts. And I just like to remind everybody that you can receive up to 4 organics carts bundled, or excuse me, included with your home's bundled trash rates. And the kitchen pail is provided to our residents as an easy way to collect the food scraps in your home and carry them and empty them out into your cart as shown in the video. So if you don't have again, if you don't have it, call the 866 number here listed on the screen, and that's also going to be in the chat available to you. Great. All right, so the next segment is the Ask an Expert segment, which hopefully will answer all of the questions you have about recycling. We hope you'll learn the most common recycling mistakes and how you can easily correct them. At this time, I'd like to introduce and welcome Susan Robinson. She's the Senior Director of Sustainability for Waste Management, and she's here to join me to answer your questions now. As a reminder, please submit any questions you have about recycling using the Q&A function. Just type the question, click enter, and that question will be available to us to answer. So let's see if we have any questions yet. And then if Susan can join me, that would be great as we get ready to answer questions.
Can you see me and hear me?
Oh, there you are, Susan.
Yeah.
So this question we have, Susan, is, why can't I recycle plastic bags in my recycling cart?
That's a question that has been asked, and we've really spent several years now really focusing on plastic bags. And it's a really good time to remind people that something is only recycled once it's made into something else. When we start the process, it's just the beginning, but really we have to make a new product out of it at the back end. So the first comment I would make is right now we don't have good ability to take those plastic bags from curbside recycling programs and make them into new products, partly because in a curbside program, they tend to be wet and dirty. However, when we can take a plastic bag back to a retail site that might collect them, many different stores collect plastic bags. They're dry and they're clean, and they actually can get recycled into new products, which is great. Part of the problem with them ending up in a curbside container is they get wet, they get dirty. They also, if you think about a plastic bag, they tend to wrap around all the equipment at the recycling facilities, causing extreme safety hazards. Our employees have to climb onto the equipment and cut them out of all of the equipment on several times a day. So we've really worked to help folks understand how important it is to not put plastic bags, and don't put your recyclables in plastic bags either in your recycling cart, because we don't know what's in them. If it's trash, we just pull those bags out. So it's really critical that folks remember, if you have clean and dry plastic bags and you have a retail site that will take them back, they're very likely to be made into a new product. But if they go into your recycling cart, unfortunately, they will likely end up in the trash.
Great, thank you, Susan. All right, do we have any questions in the chat? Looks like we don't there, but I have some other questions that are some burning questions of my own. You know, we see the little chasing arrows on a lot of items. You know, what does that mean? And if it's recyclable or not, and how do I know?
That's another question that's a very hot topic. And in fact, it's very interesting because it's being addressed at the national and the state level because it's so confusing. So decades ago, when plastics first started to grow in our stream, the industry realized that plastics look alike, but they're actually made out of different types of material. So although we use the term plastic, really a water bottle is a very different kind of plastic than a milk jug. And so those numbers on the bottom actually describe what type of plastic it is. And they really are done for the intention of the manufacturer making new things. And so they added recycling label arrows around those numbers. First, we had the numbers. There's 7 different basic types of resin, and the number 7 is other, for sometimes mixing different types of plastic resins. So number 1 is basically your water bottles. Number 2 is your milk jugs. Number 3 is polyvinyl chloride. Number 4 is bags mostly. 5 polypropylene. So they all have a different type of resin, and they don't mix well. So you really, the recyclers need them to be separate. And then they added the arrows around them, and that's what's made it so confusing. We often think just because it has an arrow that it's recyclable, but in fact, really the markets there's really only good markets for a couple of those. Those 1s, 2s, and 5s are really those numbers that have the best recycling markets at the end of the day.
Great, thanks, Susan. And I apologize, there is a question that I missed. The question is, this resident has heard mixed things about pizza boxes. So what's a definitive word on how you recycle a pizza box?
This has been another one that it's been interesting. The definitive answer to pizza boxes has actually been really a very important message from the paper mills, because they want your pizza boxes. So the key is they don't want your pizza. So most importantly is to take out any food, any pizza. And if you have like an insert, sometimes pizza comes on a little piece of wax paper of some sort. Take all of that out. If there's a little grease on the bottom, that's okay. But if it's really, really bad, don't. And please do recycle your pizza boxes. We are very aware that there's been some mixed messaging over the years, but very importantly, the promotion around pizza boxes right now is coming from the paper mills because they really want them back. Cardboard is a very valuable commodity. They will use all of it. So just make sure you keep the food out. We never want food in any form in your recycling container, and then recycle those pizza boxes.
And if it is too food contaminated, then they could put it in the organics cart, correct?
Exactly. Thank you. That's exactly right. You definitely, those food contaminated paper, whether it's a to-go box, that's paper, or whether it's your pizza box, please put those in your organics container. That's perfect.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear how it can be confusing. As on one hand, you can put it in a recycling container, and then if it's this, then it goes organic. So I guess it's all about how contaminated it is with food.
It is. That really makes a big difference.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. We have about a few more minutes. We actually have several more minutes of this segment. So any burning questions, please put them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I have some other questions that I'd like to ask. One of the things that people wonder about is whether or not the recyclables have to be clean before they put them in the container. So what exactly is the expectation around that?
Yeah, so I think the first rule of thumb would be, I think about this like my yogurt container. At the end of it, I buy bulk yogurt, and when I'm done, I clean it out really carefully and I put it in my recycling cart. I don't rinse it out with water. I think the recyclers really would like that if we do. So if you do, fine. But in terms of, I think, minimizing water use, really clean it well with a spatula so that it's very clean. So the key is we really don't want food residue that will get on other recyclables. You can ruin that. If you think about it, your recycling goes in a cart, we pick it up in a truck, it all gets mixed together, and then it goes to a recycling facility. And there's a lot of opportunity along the way for good, clean paper to get contaminated by food. And it creates problems at the recycling facility when it's food. Some of our sorting processes need for the material to be empty to be able to, we use a lot of air, shooting air and magnets and different optical sorters. And so it's based on empty containers in terms of being able to sort correctly. So really the rule of thumb is empty, clean, and dry. And if you can just remember that, empty, clean, and dry, when you put your material in your recycling cart, you will maximize the opportunity for those materials to be recycled into new products, thus offsetting the use of virgin resources, which is why we're all doing it in the first place, right back to your climate action plan that we heard about earlier.
Perfect, thank you. Oh, this is a great question from Mayor Guerrero, actually. What about styrofoam food contaminated containers? Where do those go?
In the trash. There is no market for styrofoam right now. Many places are beginning to actually not use styrofoam, and there's some legislation happening at both state and federal levels to really discourage the use of styrofoam. So really that's those styrofoam, and I'm thinking of expanded styrofoam for the most part. If you buy something sometimes at a fast food place, you'll have the kind of white expanded styrofoam, and that goes into the trash.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions posted. None right now. Oh, I have a question. Where do most of our recyclables go? I've heard that they're being exported out of the country. Is that true?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'll tell you, you can look at the national level and you can look at the state of California. The state of California has enjoyed for 20 years access to the export market. And really the recycling programs in the state have really relied on that export market and still do for some materials. So, and partly it's because you don't have a lot of mills in the state, and a lot of the mills for things are actually, interestingly enough, on the East Coast or different parts of the country. So that's a very high transportation cost versus goods and services. Goods come from Asia in particular that we buy and use. And then we can be a backhaul for that back to countries that are resource poor and that have relied on our recyclables for years to make those boxes and containers that we rely on for global goods transactions. So it's been very interesting. It's been over 20 to 30 years. It's been a very good relationship, actually, of us collecting recyclables that then get used instead of raw resources to make new goods and products in other countries. A couple things have happened. About 3 years ago, China decided that they really didn't want to be importing a lot of recyclables from other parts of the world, the entire world. So they closed their borders and officially closed last year to all material coming into the country. And that really set off a really big global redistribution. They were consuming so many recyclables from around the world that it wasn't just the US, but other countries really were struggling for markets. And so what's been nice about that is the US has really responded. Our paper mills are adding new equipment to use more recyclable materials. We're opening new paper mills. So we've adjusted and we are using a lot more material here. We used to export as a country, probably about 40% of our material as the United States was going offshore somewhere. Now we're down to less than 20, probably 15, and it's mostly very clean source separated materials and some sorts of paper. Very little plastics is going overseas. There's some new laws that prohibit exporting any plastics that's not very your water bottles are okay or your milk jugs are okay, but mixing them together doesn't work anymore. So basically we're starting to see the world change, and we are starting to see more markets develop in the state of California in the country, and we're starting to wean ourselves off of that export market. So there is still some material going overseas from California. I'd say primarily paper and very clean material that has a high demand for it, the water bottles and the milk jug sort of thing. But otherwise, we are not exporting as much as we used to at all.
Great, thanks, Susan. It's very clear that recycling and markets around that is very complicated.
Yeah, it is. It is, but it's actually, I always say I find so interesting about it, how many things in the world do you do in your kitchen and your garage that have a global impact with what we do? And it really brings it right back to our individual behavior and how important it is that we do the right thing, because there is truly a global impact with the actions that we take right in our own homes.
Yeah, it's a common Earth Day theme. Think globally, but act locally.
And this is a great example for it. Every time we choose to put something in a whatever container we put it in, it has a bigger impact beyond just our borders.
Exactly. Well, we have another question. The question is, what policies are or can be implemented to require commercial enterprises to recycle? I can take this one since this is more of a city issue, I believe. So right now we are state requires businesses to recycle. AB 341 requires businesses generating a certain threshold of waste to have a recycling program. In West Sacramento, we have made that easier through our contract with Waste Management. Mixed recycling is offered at no additional charge. So if you have trash service, you can get a recycling bin for mixed recycling at no charge and easily recycle. Policy change is coming. So there is a new regulation, Senate Bill 1383, which is a short-lived climate pollutants, will require the city to have an enforcement ordinance for organic recycling effective January 1st, 2022. When we make that code change, we are also going to include mixed recycling, since one of the components of SB 1383 is your organic material in your blue, which will be blue, it's now green, in your recycling container, essentially. So in order for us to mandate, as per state regulation, that all organics are recycled at commercial businesses, we will have an enforcement ordinance in January 2022. That initial enforcement period will be 2 years of notification and education, which we currently do, and then penalties by law will have to go into effect on January 1st, 2024. So the state regulation will mandate that the city have an enforcement ordinance, and then ultimately penalize, unfortunately, businesses who are not compliant. But our goal and our hope is that through these incentives that we offer, the no additional charge for your mixed recycling, and then also city staff, along with Waste Management, offers waste evaluations for any businesses. So we'll come to your business, help you figure out what kind of program you need. We also have interior collection containers, posters, labels, educational materials for the businesses, employees, a variety of things that we offer to you to get your program started and help you do that. So we get everyone on board before we ever have to get to the point of penalties, which is not what we want to end up doing. I hope that answers that question. And if you have anything to add on that, Susan.
No, that's great. It's great.
Okay, so we have, it's 10:53 and we don't have any other questions right now. And I think we basically covered most of the questions. I do want to mention that, a lot of people don't know where recycling goes. So we do have a mixed recycling facility where all this material is sorted. Susan mentioned a little bit about that. And we have a video that we will post on our website to show, and actually we'll post it to recyclingfund.org, which if it's not already there, and I'll mention that again towards the end of our presentation today, that has a video that shows our actual sorting facility. So you'll have an opportunity to just see exactly how these materials are sorted by Waste Management. And you'll get a better feel for what Susan was talking about with the plastic bags wrapping up on the sorting equipment, things like that. So we'll be sure to have that website available on recyclingfund.org and then also through the city's website if it's not already there.
Can I add kind of a postscript to that?
Sure.
So one of the things we've been focusing on a lot is helping folks understand how important it is that to use material, to buy material that has recycled content. And so as I mentioned, it's really important that we only are completing the loop, and we're only really seeing the benefits of recycling once it's made into something else. So we've really focused a lot, and Paulina's comment about the video reminded me, we've been really focusing on the materials that are made out of what we recycle. And plastic in particular is interesting. There's some really good new products, and we as a company have been really promoting that. For example, our carts are now made with the plastic that we collect in our curbside program. And beginning this year, all of our drivers are wearing uniforms made out of PET water and soda bottles. So and you can do that too. You can buy clothing that's made out of PET often. And so we are encouraging cities, states, the federal government to encourage buying recycled products and requiring that your vendors use recycled content. And we are doing the same. Our purchasing department is prioritizing purchasing materials made with post-consumer content. And we can all do that individually as well. So it is a reminder that really it's not enough just to put the material in the cart. We need to also help pull that demand through by buying products made with recycled content. And that's really how, we can really make an impact by reducing our emissions associated with the materials we buy and use.
Perfect. Thank you, Susan. That's a fantastic reminder of how we can close the loop, not just put the stuff in your cart, but then buy products that are made from recycled materials. Perfect segue into the next segment. As I think about doing this virtual event and missing the opportunity to see you all in person, as we've done in the past at our in-person Earth Day events, one of the things that we're not able to do right now is have those vendors that we've had at our events in the past. We showcase local vendors who promote and sell sustainably made goods. So as a way to encourage you to shop locally and sustainably, we're going to focus on 4 of the vendors that have participated in our past events. What you see right now on the screen is Driftwood Clothing's website. And again, all these websites will be available to you at recyclingfund.org. And then we're also posting a lot of them in the chat, so you can pick them up there as well. But this company makes hand screen clothing, as you're seeing on the screen. They make kitchen towels, reusable shopping bags. They're clicking through there. You can see some of their products. They use all water-based inks. And they even make their t-shirt tags out of recycled seed paper. And what that means is that the tag that comes with that shirt, after you're done with, cut the tag off and you're going to wash your shirt, that tag can actually be planted and it will grow into beautiful wildflowers. So they're doing a lot to really reduce their impact. And so, again, we're just trying to showcase some of our past vendors. And this is Driftwood Clothing that's up available right now. All right, so the next vendor we have is Jake Castro. So Jake is a local vendor. He makes all of his products here in the Sacramento area in Oak Park. Beautiful handmade jewelry, as you can see, and leather goods. If they scroll down, there's some really beautifully made handmade leather and leather wallets and things, and some bags. And again, a local, shop local is a really good thing to remember. These are folks that are right here in your community making their own handmade goods. He's also a local mural artist, and you can see that on his website too. And next is Nightingale Farms. Oh yeah, there's the mural that they just showed, sorry. And Nightingale Farms, oh, there we go, yeah, sorry, thanks guys. And Nightingale Farms crafts products from fresh goat milk. And one of the things that they do is practice sustainable farming, which includes low stocking densities. And then they provide quality care for all of their animals. And this is some of the products that they have, lotions and soaps that are made locally from their goat's milk from their farm. So another way, and a lot of these things might be good Mother's Day presents, for example. And last but not least, we have Z Specialty Foods. They offer simple natural ingredients, chocolate, dried nuts, fruit, and of course, pure honey that they make using a process that has zero waste. And as we're getting close to 11 o'clock, this is making me hungry. So again, I just wanted everyone to have an opportunity to see some of the local vendors that we've worked with in the past. And just remind folks to shop locally whenever you can. And as Susan mentioned earlier, try to find vendors who sell things that are recycled content or otherwise sustainable. So thanks for looking at those vendors. And as we wrap up today, we have one last offering to you. We have a video that we made with Mr. Eco, and the video is going to be posted in the chat for you. He is a rap superhero and YouTuber, and otherwise known as Eco Hero. He created a video that's specific to West Sacramento. It's called Sort Like Crazy in West Sac. It's a game show style video that's educational and engaging. Kids get to play along and learn about proper recycling in West Sacramento. And it also empowers them to teach their friends and families how to recycle that way as well. That video link again is in the chat box, and it will give access to this exclusive video for you. And again, everything that we've shared today, all of the links either to vendors or our videos will be at recyclingfund.org, and they're currently in the chat as we're still on the event. The recyclingfund.org website will be available until May 6th, and that recyclingfund.org is also in the chat right now. And the last thing I'd like to remind everyone before we wrap up today is that the first 20 people who registered for the event on Eventbrite and then also attended will receive a free goodie bag from West Sacramento, and we will notify you by email. You need to live in West Sacramento because we are going to deliver those bags to your home for you. And again, thank you all for joining us. I really hope that next year we are able to do an in-person live event like we've done in the past, but I really appreciate you taking the time today to hear more about our climate action plan, to talk to us and learn more about recycling properly. And hopefully these things will be good takeaways for you as you go about your day and celebrate Earth Day every day. So again, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. Have a great day. Thank you.